Hi, this video is part of my complete Docker and Kubernetes course. The link is in the description of the video, so make sure to give a thumbs up, and if you don't want to miss any updates, subscribe to the channel. That being said, let's get started. Hello and welcome back. Let's set up the database for our notebooks backend. The process here will be fairly similar to what we have already set up for our key value store. So let's go a little bit more quickly through the steps. I'm just going to create here a notebooks-db. This is going to be our database service. And as you already know, the image will be the mongodb/mongodb-community-server. And the tag here will simply be 7.0-Ubuntu 22.04. We should then set up some environment variables for our root database for the initialization script, and let's put them inside of an env file. We're just going to call this .env like so, or .env if you prefer to say so. Let's then create this file here, .env, and let's add the variables. The first one is the mongodb_initdb_root, and that's initdb_root_username. I'm just going to say root once again. And for the password here, we're just going to say root password. So password, it's going to be root password like so. Let's leave this file as it is. We will extend this a little bit later when we have our database, our notebooks database, user and password. But for now, let's leave it as it is, and we will populate here via the env file configuration. Let's then set up here two volumes. So the first volume will be the volume for our persistent data. And we'll just say here type volume. And then the source will be our notebooks data. We haven't created this volume yet. So let's come here at the bottom. We're going to say volumes. And we'll simply say notebooks-data like so. This will also ensure that the volumes are created. We should then set the target here, and the target within our container you already know is /data/db. Let's then also create here within our notebooks backend another folder called db-config. We're going to just create another script that's going to be a mongo-init.js script. This script will be very similar to what we have done so far, so I'm just going to go a little bit faster here. Notebooks db user, we're going to say const notebooks db password, and we'll also say const notebooks db name. The user will be just equal to process.env.notebooks db user. The notebooks db password, very similar, just going to copy paste it here, password like so, and the same thing for the name, notebooks db name. We can then say console log initializing, let's put it like this, initializing notebooks db user. And then we'll simply say again, same code, db is equal to db.get sibling db, and we will pass the notebooks db name here. And then we'll say db.create user. And this receives an object. The user will be our notebooks db user. The pwd or password will be our notebooks db password. And the roles here will be an array of roles, with the single role that we want to give is a read-write role to the db notebooks db name. Perfect. Let's save this, and let's now add this to our compose file as another volume. The type of this volume will be a bind mount, so we just type bind here. The source will be our current directory /db-config/mongo-init.js, and the target here will be /docker-entry-point-init db.d/mongo-init.js. We will also mark this as read-only by setting the read-only flag to true. Perfect. The last thing I would like to do here in our Docker Compose is to set up a network. That's just going to be the notebooks net. And we will then use, or actually we could say notebooks backend net, for example, but just notebooks net I think is enough. So now we can connect both containers to this network by giving the net, so the notebooks dash net here in both containers or in both services. Once we do that, we will be able to connect between these services here. We will be able to reach the notebooks DB via its name as it is defined here. Let's just confirm connectivity by coming to the server. We're going to now const mongoose is equal to require mongoose. And then we'll simply say here, before we actually listen, we will say mongoose.connect. And then we would like to provide here process.env.db_URL. And this we will pass as a URL. Here we can already pass the URL containing both the username and the password. And then we will say then. And the moment we successfully connect, we're going to execute a callback function. And this callback function here will just trigger the app.listen. We also would like to console log here. So we're just going to print something, console log connected. We're going to say connected MongoDB starting server like so. And then we will simply say app.listen here. And if there is any error, then we would also like to say, or we would like to catch this error here. And then we'll simply console log or console.error. And we will say just something went wrong. And then we will once again print the error here at the bottom like so. Perfect. Let's save this to format it a little bit better. And now we can come back here to our Docker Compose and we can add another environment for the db_URL. Now the db_URL here will have the format of mongodb : / and then here we provide the user : and then the password. And then we say here add. We can then use the notebooks-db here. And then we'll say / and then this is going to be the DB name. Right, so now here the username we already know, or actually we don't know that yet because we have not defined it here. So we have already defined the environment variables, but we did not define this inside of the env file. Let's just define this inside of the env file. And then I can also show you something cool here that we can use with Docker Compose. So I'm just copying these variables and now I'm just going to define some dummy values. So that's going to be notebooks or nb_user. That's going to be then nb_pwd or password. And then this one here is going to be nb_database or nb_db. Maybe for this one here, we can be a little bit more explicit. We're just going to say notebooks_db like so. Let's then save this, come back to our compose.yaml. And now we do not need to load the env file here in our notebooks service. What we can do and what we should actually do here is just extract the relevant information from this file to build the URL that we need for our MongoDB database. Let's see how that works. And this is called interpolation in Docker Compose. So if you use this syntax, Docker Compose will look for a .env. It has to have this name here, .env. And then it's going to look for the values of these variables, these environment variables here. And it's going to interpolate in this string. So we're just going to say the notebooks_db user. And then we're going to use this one here, the notebooks_db password. So let's just put it like this. And then we have the notebooks_db, the name of the service. And now we have the database name like so. This is one alternative for us to actually extract this information from a .env file or from environment variables. That's also fine. And then build our URL and pass just a single DB URL to our notebooks backend. Since we also have the env file here, then the notebooks_db should also be initialized with the correct credentials here in the mongo_init.js, and our services should be good to go. Let's save this file. Come back to the terminal here. I'm already inside the notebooks backend folder from the previous lectures. If you are not, just change into this folder. Let's, for the sake of completeness here, run a Docker Compose down, just to make sure we have removed everything. And now we can run a Docker Compose up -- build like so. Once we do that, we should also see that both the notebooks DB and the notebook services, they are both up and running. And if we were to quickly switch to Postman and send a GET request to our localhost port 3000, then we would confirm at the bottom here that we are still getting the message successfully. One small thing I haven't specified here is the dependency between notebooks and notebooks DB. And this is still okay because behind the scenes, the notebook service, the mongoose here that we are calling this mongoose.connect method, it is trying multiple times to connect to the database. So even if there is a small delay in initializing our notebooks DB service and the database is not available for a couple of seconds, then mongoose will eventually manage to connect to it after the database is up and running. We can also make sure that this dependency is explicit by just defining here depends on notebooks-db like so. Perfect. So we managed to complete the setup for our notebooks backend standalone service here. So our standalone application, it is composed of two services, both a notebook service as well as a notebooks DB service. And the setup here is already very familiar to you because we have done that twice. We have done that once manually by writing the plain Docker commands. And we also have done a simpler version here when exploring the different features of Docker Compose. Perfect. Let's quickly switch to the terminal. Let's stop here the running process. Let's take our containers, or basically stop our containers. This is not going to remove the container. So this is not the equivalent to Docker Compose down. If we were to just run Docker Compose ps-a, we will get the containers here. They are still they still exist. They were not removed. So if we want to clean up, we can just run Docker Compose down. And once we run Docker Compose ps-a, then we get no containers back. Awesome. This is a great moment for us to take a short break, and let's come back in the next lecture.